The night I saw the man slip the silver key card into the back pocket of the waiter who would later save my life, I didn't yet understand that secrets have a way of revealing themselves at the most inconvenient times. And if you're enjoying the unraveling of this mystery as much as I'm about to tell it, go ahead and subscribe, and tell me where you're watching from, because this story, my friend, begins in motion and only spirals deeper from here. It started on a rain-slicked evening in Seoul, the kind of night where neon lights ripple across puddles like trembling jewels, and I, your faithful narrator, watched Adana Okoro stumble into the revolving doors of the Royal Minjae Hotel looking like the universe had personally decided to test her patience. She was soaked through, her braids sticking to her cheeks, her conference badge already wilting from the downpour, and yet she carried herself with that particular brand of quiet dignity Black women, where even when exhausted, even when wronged, even when a world far from home forgets it owes them grace. She should have checked in easily. She had booked months in advance, but fate, or perhaps something darker, had other plans, and when the receptionist blinked at her monitor, frowned, and politely informed her there was no reservation under that name, I saw Adana's shoulders tighten, the kind of subtle shift a person makes when they're close to giving up but refuse to. Behind her, guests in designer coats breezed past, glancing her way with the fleeting curiosity reserved for strangers with misfortune, and that was when the man I thought was a waiter approached, wearing a simple black shirt, sleeves rolled neatly to the elbow. No name tag, no smile, just a quiet awareness, like he saw everything without choosing to react. "Miss, can I help you?" he asked, voice low, steady, oddly gentle for someone carrying a tray of empty champagne flutes. She apologized immediately, assuming he was staff like I did, explaining in quick, tired breaths about the lost luggage, the missing room, the conference she traveled 14 hours for, and the way the airline attendant shrugged when her suitcase vanished into thin air. Most men would have murmured sympathy, promised to check with management, and disappeared forever. But this man leaned in, studying her like he was memorizing the lines of her frustration, not in a predatory way, but in the way someone evaluates damage so they can quietly fix it. "Give me a moment," he said, then stepped behind the front desk without hesitation, startling the receptionist who scrambled to her feet and bowed repeatedly, strange behavior toward a waiter. Moments later, the manager emerged breathless, bowing even lower, offering apologies so sincere they bordered on fear, and I remember thinking, what waiter commands fear? Another 10 minutes passed before a black sedan arrived with her luggage. Her reservation was restored with an upgrade, a gift basket, and more apologies than she could count. Adana stood there stunned, her brows knitting in confusion as she finally asked, "How did you do all that?" The man didn't answer immediately. Instead, he glanced around as though ensuring no one else was listening, and I swear the air shifted, an almost imperceptible tightening, like something hidden was stretching beneath the surface. Finally, he said, "I'm not a waiter," in a tone that carried both apology and warning. "My name is Kong Seo-jun." Even I recognized the name, CEO of Minjae Holdings, the hospitality conglomerate that owned that hotel, half the street it sat on, and possibly the entire skyline if rumors were true. The same CEO who was known for power, privacy, and a ruthlessly controlled life far from the lobby floor. Adana's face flushed instantly, mortified that she had asked one of the country's most influential figures to help like he was there to refill her drink, but Seo-jun only gave a small, almost shy smile. The kind a man gives when he's been mistaken for less than he is and finds the rare novelty pleasant, not insulting. And then something happened I didn't understand until much later. A pair of men in suits stepped out from the elevator at the far end of the lobby, scanning the area with the stiff urgency of men instructed to retrieve someone important. But the moment their eyes landed on Seo-jun standing beside Adana, they paused, hesitated, then turned discreetly away as if they'd stumbled upon a scene they were forbidden to interrupt. Seo-jun noticed. His expression didn't change, but his posture did, just slightly, shoulders angling protectively toward Adana, his gaze flicking sharper, colder. It was the first sign that this wasn't simply a story about a helpful CEO and a tired Black woman far from home. Something else was happening. Something calculated. something dangerous. But Adana, sweet, earnest Adana, only saw a man being unexpectedly kind. She didn't notice the way the receptionist whispered urgently into her headset the moment Seojun stepped away. She didn't notice the dark car that lingered across the street with its engine running. She didn't notice the way Seojun's eyes kept darting toward the mezzanine level where shadows shifted unnaturally, as though someone above watched them with too much interest. She didn't know yet that her arrival had disrupted more than hotel operations. She didn't know yet that her name, her face, her presence, an outsider, a foreigner, a black woman unconnected to Korean politics or business dynasties, posed a threat to someone powerful enough to hide their motives behind boardrooms and money. And she absolutely didn't know that the man she mistook for a waiter had been searching for a way out of his own life when she stumbled into his, nor that their collision would set off a chain reaction neither of them could control. But I knew. I watched the moment his gaze lingered on her a second too long, not with the hunger of a man attracted, but the fear of a man who realized something unexpected. She made him visible. Not as a CEO, not as power, but as a person. And for a man like Kang Seojun, visibility was the most dangerous thing of all. That was the night everything began. The night a drenched woman and a disguised billionaire collided under Seoul's neon glow, unaware that their meeting wasn't coincidence. It was a spark, and the shadows were already moving. Adana didn't realize anything was wrong until the elevator doors closed, sealing her inside with a silence too heavy for a simple ride to the 20th floor. And I, your narrator, remember clocking the moment her instincts finally kicked in. That subtle shift of her shoulders and the narrowing of her eyes as she watched the floor numbers climb too slowly, as though something unseen dragged the car upward with reluctance. Meanwhile, down in the lobby, Kang Seojun watched those same doors close. With a tension so sharp it cut through the polished calm he usually wore like armor, the kind of tension that told me he knew trouble wasn't brewing, it had already arrived. When Adana stepped off the elevator and into the dim corridor lined with soft golden sconces, she paused, because the air felt wrong, charged with a static prickling that brushed the back of her neck, and although she told herself it was only exhaustion, part of her still checked over her shoulder before sliding her upgraded keycard into the lock of her suite. I watched from the hallway's reflection as the door clicked open, spilling warm light over her, revealing a stunning room with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the glittering sprawl of Seoul. But even luxury couldn't soothe the knot in her stomach. She wandered the space slowly, the plush king bed, the marble bathroom, the welcome basket filled with rare teas and delicate tangerine peel chocolates, touching things lightly, as if afraid they were illusions that would dissolve if she pressed too hard. Yet beneath her wonder, a question simmered. Why had a CEO personally fixed her problems when dozens of staff could have? And why had those two suited men retreated at the mere sight of him? She didn't have long to ponder, because just as she placed her phone down to charge, a faint sound echoed from the hallway, a soft, deliberate shuffle, barely audible but wrong enough to freeze her mid-step. I saw her eyes dart to the door, her pulse visible at the base of her throat, and then the knock came. Firm, authoritative, unmistakably from someone who believed they had a right to enter. "Hotel security," a voice called out. "We need to verify your identity." But something in the tone, too sharp, too practiced, too mechanical, made her pulse spike. Security didn't sound like that. Real security announced themselves twice. Real security didn't come minutes after check-in. And real security didn't jiggle the handle when a guest didn't respond. "One moment," she forced out, stepping backward, heart pounding so loud I swear it echoed against the glass. Her mind raced through her options: call the front desk, call Seojun, barricade the door, and her trembling fingers had just reached for the phone when another sound cut through the room, a muffled voice on the other side of the door. Not the first man's, deeper, irritated. "She's alone. Just open it." The handle jerked harder this time. Fear slammed into her chest so violently she staggered back, knocking into the edge of the dresser. Whoever was outside wasn't hotel staff. They were here for her. And they weren't planning to leave. She grabbed the heavy lamp, gripping it like a weapon, her breath sharp and shallow, when suddenly everything stopped. The voices, the rattling handle, the forced entry, it all ceased. Silence swallowed the hallway. Then a new voice broke through, low but unmistakably commanding. Step away from this door right now. Seo-jun. But not the gentle version. The voice he used downstairs had been soft, controlled. This one sounded like winter steel, like a man who didn't ask for obedience, but expected it. She heard rustling, hurried footsteps, a muttered curse, then the ding of the elevator doors closing again. Seconds later, an urgent knock, 3 short raps, and Seo-jun's voice, taut but clear. "Adana, it's me. Open the door." She ran to the peephole, hands shaking, and there he was, drenched from the rain that had resumed outside, chest rising sharply like he had sprinted up 20 floors, jaw clenched tight with something that looked like fear or fury. She unlocked the door, and he merely stumbled inside, immediately checking the corners of the room, the windows, even the closet, moving with the precision of someone who'd done this before. Only when he was sure the suite was secure did he finally turn to face her. "They weren't hotel staff," he said quietly, wiping rain from his brow. "I know," she whispered, setting the lamp down slowly. "But why were they here? Why me?" He hesitated. And in that hesitation, the truth I had suspected from the moment she walked in with rain-soaked braids finally began to surface. "Because you were seen with me. But we barely know each other." "That doesn't matter," he replied. "Certain people, powerful people, are watching my every move. They don't like surprises." His gaze drifted toward the door as though he expected it to burst open again. "And you're a surprise." Something about the way he said it made her chest tighten, not with fear this time, but with the disorienting awareness that she had stepped into the gravitational pull of a life much bigger, much more dangerous, and much more complicated than she ever intended. "Seo-jun," she murmured, "who were those men?" He didn't answer. Instead, he stepped closer, lowering his voice. "You need to trust me when I tell you that someone is trying to remove you from this hotel, and not because of anything you did." She swallowed hard. "Then why?" His eyes met hers, dark and troubled and startlingly soft. "Because my mother thinks you matter." That sentence hung between them, electric and terrifying. His mother. The shadow that threaded through every corridor of his life. The ghost who commanded obedience even when absent. The matriarch whose approval built empires and whose anger destroyed them. Before Adana could respond, Seo-jun's phone buzzed violently, lighting up with his single name, the only name capable of draining the color from his face in an instant. He showed her the screen. "Mother. She knows you're here," he whispered. "And she's coming." And that was the moment I understood. Whatever danger loomed over them hadn't begun tonight. It had started long before Adana arrived, long before she stepped into the lobby soaked and exhausted, because Kang Seo-jun had been living inside a gilded cage built by someone who saw every human connection as a threat, and now, by accident or fate, Adana had become the most dangerous connection of all. When Madame Kong entered the suite without waiting to be invited, as if the air and walls themselves belonged to her, I watched Adana straighten her spine, the fear from moments earlier melting into the kind of quiet courage that transforms a room. And it was the first time I saw her not as a woman caught inside someone else's storm, but as the storm itself. Madame Kong froze upon seeing her, eyes narrowing with the cold precision of a woman accustomed to eliminating problems before they grew. Teeth, and when she finally spoke, her words slid through the room like knives dipped in silk. "My son's future is not a playground for tourists." Seo-jun stepped between them immediately, but Adana gently pushed his arm aside, not breaking Madame Kang's gaze, and her voice, steady, low, unshakable, carried the weight of a lifetime of being underestimated. "Your son can speak for himself." The older woman's jaw twitched, and used a defiance, especially from a black foreigner she'd likely assumed would fold under a single glare. But Adana did not fold. Instead, she stepped forward, closing the distance, raining courage heavier than the downpour outside, telling Madame Kong in calm, clipped words that she had come to Korea for her career, not for a man, not for trouble, and certainly not to be intimidated by someone who wielded power like a weapon. Words that should have escalated, though. Confrontation, but unexpectedly, impossibly, made the room still, because the truth is powerful women recognize other powerful women, even when they pretend not to. Seojun watched them with a mixture of fear and awe, and when he finally turned toward his mother, something had shifted inside him, something fierce, something finished, and he told her, for the first time in his life, that he would not be controlled, would not be married off like a bargaining chip, would not obey her command to remove Adana from the hotel or the city or his orbit, and each word cracked through the suite like thunder-breaking chains. But Madame Kong, pride mortared into every bone, responded with threats, whispers of inherited scandals, quiet mentions of immigration pull, corporate ruin, until Adana stepped in again, telling her plainly that if Madame Kong wanted to destroy her life, she should at least know the person she intended to fight, and then she told her story. The long flights, the lost luggage, the years she had clawed her way through medical research underfunded and overlooked, the sacrifices her mother made so she could be the first doctor in her family, the battles she fought daily as a black woman in a world that pretended to be advanced, but still stumbled over her skin. She told it without theatrics, without pleading, without softening her truth. And for a fleeting second, even I saw it, Madame Kong blinked, not with sympathy, but with the faintest flicker of recognition, the kind a general has when realizing their enemy has never once considered surrender. But pride is a curse that rarely loosens its grip, and Madame Kong, stubborn to the last breath of control, gave a single nod, murmured a warning wrapped in civility, and swept out of the room with the cold confidence of someone who believes time and power will eventually bend all things. When the door clicked shut, the silence that followed was thick enough to choke on, and Seojun, looking strangely young without his armor of authority, whispered, "She won't stop," to which Adana responded with a truth even sharper, "Neither will I." And that was the hinge moment, the one where everything shifted, not because a billionaire chose a woman, nor because that woman refused to shrink, but because two people standing in a gilded prison finally realized they could tear down the bars together. So Seojun did something no one in Seoul's upper circles had expected. He walked away. He stepped down from his role, cut ties from the dynastic leash wrapped around his throat, and built something of his own, a smaller company, quieter, freer, and in that space he and Adana forged a life that wasn't dictated by politics, bloodlines, or expectations, but by choice, mutual respect, stubborn resilience, and the kind of affection that grows not from fairy tale theatrics, but from seeing someone in their worst moments and choosing them anyway. As for Madame Kong, she never apologized, her pride would never allow it, but she also never approached Adana again, because even she understood the danger of underestimating a woman who stood her ground in a foreign land with nothing but dignity and determination. And in time, the scandal rumor faded, the gossip shifted elsewhere, and Seoul moved on, as cities always do. But the truth remained etched in the quiet spaces where stories become legends. The night-soaked black woman mistook one of the most powerful men in Korea for a waiter was the same night she saved him from a life that wasn't his, and the same night he silently, quietly, without ever intending to, saved her right back.